Syria's President Ahmed Al-Shara has had a rather monumental week at the UN General Assembly, giving the first address by a Syrian leader in nearly 60 years, where he urged for sanctions relief to help his country rebuild from decades of Assad's brutality.
Through intensive diplomatic activity, Syria restored its international relations and forged regional and global partnerships and achieved the gradual lifting of most sanctions. And we call now for the complete lifting of sanctions so that they no longer shackle the Syrian people.
Well, he also met US President Donald Trump yesterday, just as he did in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, back in May. And he met with the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, to formally restore diplomatic ties. Quite a visual for the Kremlin, of course, which propped up Assad's regime. Or perhaps no moment is more striking than Al-Shara sitting down with the US general who arrested him for fighting with Al-Qaeda against the US invasion of Iraq. There you see General David Petraeus with Al-Shara at a global summit earlier this week, where he said he was a fan of the Syrian leader. Well, it is a stunning turnaround, an open embrace from the international community when just under a year ago, Al-Shara had a $10 million bounty on his head for terrorism. While some Syrians are excited that their country's returning to the global stage, the pageantry is a stark contrast to the glaring issue that Al-Shara barely addressed this week. The pain and fear many of Syria's minorities feel around the country waves as a country undergoes waves of sectarian violence. And I want to spotlight the Druze community in particular, which during a series of escalating tensions back in July came under an unprecedented violent attack in Suwaida in southern Syria. Now, our own CNN technical director and editor Raid Balan is from Suwaida, and through his lens we've put together the story of Druze civilians who were caught in the crossfires of government-affiliated and militia violence, and a warning that this report contains disturbing and graphic video. This is Suwaida in southern Syria a decade ago, through the eyes of a CNN producer. Life followed a simple rhythm. Farmers in their fields, vineyards under the sun. Ancient cities dotted the hills, echoes of Suwaida's deep history. Home to Syria's Druze community, an ethnic religious minority in the Levant, but where people of all faiths lived in peace. Churches and mosques stood side by side. From quiet countryside to a city alive with music and daily life. A pocket of relative peace and semi-autonomy, while much of Syria was engulfed in civil war. In July 2025, all of that changed. Suwaida woke to a different sound. Tensions between Druze and Bedouin groups erupted into sectarian violence. Troops and militia affiliated with the new Syrian government, which had overthrown Bashar al-Assad, marched towards the city to stop the fighting. The Interior Minister called it a, quote, national mission to protect civilians and restore order. But Druze civilians say they bore the brunt of the violence at the hands of government-aligned fighters. They reported gruesome attacks, which they viewed as part of a systemic persecution against several minorities under the new president, Ahmed Al-Shara. Several eyewitnesses shared suspicions with CNN that the government's entry to Suwaida was a pretext to tighten control.
This attack on Suwaida was carried out by members of the Syrian Ministry of Defense and the Syrian Ministry of Interior. They relied on foreign terrorist mercenary militias. It was a systematic sectarian killing targeting the province of Suwaida. Executions on the ground.
Syria's president maintained that the military was operating in Suwaida to de-escalate tensions and denounced the crimes that unfolded in the process without specifying whether his forces were complicit.
The Syrian state is committed to protecting minorities and religious communities throughout the country. It remains determined to hold accountable all those involved in crimes against the nation and will not allow anyone to escape justice. We denounce all crimes that have occurred, whether inside or outside Suwaida.
Yet the UN, human rights groups and witnesses on the ground told another story. A story of fear, humiliation and a city dragged into violence it never sought. The warning signs were visible months prior, after waves of sectarian violence against Syria's Alawite and Christian religious minorities. Then, across Syria, spontaneous protests erupted with chants calling for the Druze to be wiped out. Syrian government-aligned military personnel shouted slurs, promising humiliation, not protection.
They entered in indescribable numbers, killed our sons, killed our women, burned our homes and displaced us. They deprived us of water. They deprived us of everything.
More than 30 villages burned to the ground and roughly 175,000 families forced from their homes, carrying little more than what they could hold, according to the UN. Possibly the youngest victim, a 3-month-old baby. Her father telling CNN she was killed alongside her mum. UN experts reporting hundreds more killed, wounded, abducted and allegations of rape. They are in contact with Syrian officials with no updates as of yet.
Many victims fell because of systemic killings accompanied by torture. Alongside all this came looting and arson. These buildings stand before you now. They burn it until it turns black like the darkness of their hearts.
Video obtained by CNN showing churches set ablaze, along with Druze shrines and temples, sacred places reduced to ash. What began as the promise of protection left behind devastation, grief and a community wondering why it was targeted at all. The violence drew in a key power just beyond Syria's borders, with a long-standing interest in Suwaida. Israel launched airstrikes, claiming to protect the Druze community, while Damascus's operations inside Suwaida were backed by its top ally, Turkey. Caught in between were the people of Suwaida, watching as they felt their province turned into a battleground of regional agendas. By July the 20th, a ceasefire was cemented between Syrian government forces, Israel, the Druze and Bedouins. Damascus withdrew its troops, but the scars remain. Grief rippling from village to village, touching nearly every family. A humanitarian crisis still unfolds. Centuries of history lost in hours. Yet amid the devastation, people endure, burying their dead, tending to the wounded, clinging to fragments of daily life. For Suwaida and Syrians across the country, this feels like a turning point. Will it lead to autonomy, federalism, or another cycle of repression? The answer hangs in the balance, suspended between hope and fear.
Gareth Brown, who is the Economist's Syria correspondent, who captured the sentiment of this week well. Quote, Mr. Shara's legacy